is starting the reading journey at literacy level. During the session, these are the aims that we're going to cover. So exploring the significance of phonics instruction for reading success, identifying a structure for a reading lesson at literacy level. And just to be clear here, literacy level is A0 according to the Common European Framework. So it's when students come in and have to start from the beginning, the alphabet, basically. We'll also look at some activity examples and throughout the session reflect on our own practice teaching reading at literacy level. Before I start, just a little bit about me. My name's Zahra. I work at the British Council here in Bahrain, and I've been here for almost 6 years now. I've done my Delta and I've done training. Most of my work is around literacy. So I've experimented with teaching literacy to kids, adults, and teenagers. I've developed the syllabus for the courses that we offer at the British Council in Bahrain. Okay, so I'd like to first start with poll questions to get you to sort of think about where you stand with teaching literacy in the context of teaching reading. For those of you who are new to quizzes, it works like this. Basically, you go onto your Google Chrome, whatever you're using, type in quizzes join. I will show you a code on my screen and you will enter that code. You can do this on your phone. That's easier if you're using your laptop. And then answer the poll questions you see on the screen, basically. So just give me a minute to share the code with you. Okay, you should be able to see it on my screen now. It's 270362. I'll give you a couple of seconds to join.
Hello, can you repeat the code because I'm not able to see it?
Yeah, the code is 270362.
270362.
Yes.
Thank you.
I've got 3 of 8 participants. I will start in 20 seconds. Okay. So most of you think that your reading habits have contributed to your language abilities. That's a good start then. Okay. I'm particularly pleased with the response here because starting with the letter sounds is the right way to go, and we'll explore that a little bit more during the session. Okay, so most of you think it's because they don't read at home. Does anyone like to share a little bit on why our students don't read at home? Why do you think? Any responses?
I'll
Yes,
share, Zahra.
mm-hmm.
I feel that, I mean, I compare my own childhood. I pretty much feel that families these days, they get together to, you know, watch Netflix or watch videos or TV or movies. And of course, to this generation, that's probably more interesting than picking up a book or reading a book online. When I was growing up, we didn't have that much to watch on TV, quite frankly. And books were an exciting family time. You know, we'd all go to the library together to check out books, etc. So that's why I said that one, and they haven't been taught to read the right way, as my responses.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. There's so many other forms of entertainment, and growing up for me as well, mostly what we had was books. And so we were encouraged to read that way. I've got an answer here from Babita. They find reading less stimulating than what they do on the screen. That's true, yes. So that's one of the challenges that we have as teachers, to sort of make books more interesting for students. Okay, let's go back to the presentation. All right. So how does reading help with language acquisition? We are looking at analytic versus synthetic phonics instruction, foundational reading skills, and we're going to look at basically the structure of a phonics lesson, literacy lesson. Now, while I tell you what I have to tell you, basically, I'd like you to try and decide what goes in the gaps. You don't necessarily have to answer these, sorry. Let's try that again. Okay, are you all able to see my my screen still?
Yes, I have no, yeah, I can see it, no problem.
Okay, cool. So try and fill out the gaps as I speak. You don't have to share the answers on chat, but you can if you want to. This is just for you to sort of think about what we're talking about. So we've got the analytic and the synthetic phonics approach. And the analytic one is basically when students do not get any sound awareness or any blending. And what they're required to do is look at words as a whole and then use whatever they learn as they look at words to sort of guess other words and help them read. So the approach kind of gets them to try and read, and it's sort of a hit and miss, basically. The synthetic phonics approach allows students to understand the letter sounds and be able to recognize and identify them, and then put them together to blend them or separate them to sound them out singly, which we call segmenting. And this allows them to apply their phonemic knowledge and read the words and sound out the words. If you want more information on these two approaches, and I think it helps to really understand how these work, I'm putting a link on chat from getreadingright.com, which you can look at later. Now, studies have shown, particularly a 2012 study by Johnston, McGowan, and Watson, have shown that the synthetic approach is more effective. In fact, one of the observations of the study was that reading was above average level when students learn to read through the synthetic approach. Also, the synthetic approach helps students develop better reading, spelling, and eventually comprehension, which we will look at in the next slide. One of the problems that, well, skeptics of the synthetic phonics approach presented was the issue of sight words, because there are quite a few words in English that do not follow sort of the usual phonemic rules. But this particular study from 2012 showed that students were still able to read sight words because they were able to use their phonemic knowledge and their knowledge of spelling and sort of connect and make connections in their head to understand how to read sight words. Okay. If you have any questions as we go on, please feel free to step in and ask. Let's go on to the next slide. So, foundational reading skills. The State Collaborative for Reforming Education, they're based in the US, SCORE is the short form. They define foundational reading skills as decoding. So this is basically being able to understand words, syllables, and like I said, phonemes, and then being able to put them all together. Decoding, it also includes recognizing that we read from the top of the page to the bottom of the page, and that in English we read from left to right. So all these little things. And then decoding leads to fluency. And fluency then leads to comprehension. And once you've got these foundational reading skills, you are then able to comprehend the text better. And then once you've got the more advanced reading skills, like background knowledge and vocabulary knowledge, you're then able to use the advanced reading skills like guessing, meaning, inference, etc. Shanahan, 2017, describes reading as the ability to make sense of text. And so that again is comprehension. And to be able to do that, foundational reading skills are the first step, which, like I said, leads to decoding skills and then eventually comprehension. So what should be in a phonics program? Sorry, yeah. So in a phonics program, phonemic awareness is really important. And so this is segmenting and blending. Segmenting, like I said, is being able to separate the sounds in a word, and blending is being able to put them together to read a word. So for example, cat gives you the word cat. And if you have the word cat, you can get students to recognize the initial, middle, and the final sound. So for example, what's the middle sound? Ah. So that's a really important part of teaching literacy and reading. And then after that, you've got to think of things like the sounds that students you are teaching are already familiar with when they start their reading journey. So most of my experience is with Arabic speakers. And so when we start the course, we start with the sounds that they are already familiar with, sounds that are already there in the Arabic language. So for example, b, t, those kinds of sounds. These would be easy for them because they already know these sounds. But sounds like p, for example, would be challenging and takes a lot of time for them to acquire because they do not have p in the Arabic language. So besides blending, segmenting, and knowing how the sounds work in L1, there's the vowel sounds, which you need to start with early on. And we usually start with A and I, so that's A and E, and then slowly build your way up to the double vowel sounds and so on. We also try to focus quite a bit on consonant blends, especially because for some of the sounds, a schwa gets inserted, and so that students need a lot of practice with that. So for example, if you have t, for example, when we say it singly, we say t, but when we put it with a letter, so tr, for example, we say tr, but students can sometimes struggle with this, and what you hear them saying is ter. So this is something that you need to get them to work on. The most important thing with literacy teaching and reading at this level is the constant repetition of the vowel sounds and of segmenting and blending as they build on. It's not very hard to do with consonants because the consonant sounds always come up during reading, but with the vowel sounds, it's necessary to go back to the basic ones and review them. So that's basically what should be in a phonics program. It should definitely be structured and there should be repetitive practice. Okay, so here's an example of what a phonics focused lesson should look like. I've got these stages here, and I want you to try and put them in the right order. So this is just one lesson, and we would start with C, introducing the sound or a set of 3 sounds. If you could on chat, put these in the right order, starting from C, and we'll then go through it together. Let's have 1 more minute and then we'll do it together. Okay, so most of your answers are similar, with just slight changes between all of you. So let's do it together. We first introduce the sound, or a set of 3 sounds. I wouldn't do more than 3 sounds at a time, unless it's consonant sounds that they are already familiar with. And this is only for teenagers and for adults. Usually with children, it's 1 sound or 2 sounds per lesson. With vowels, I try to keep it 1 sound. With consonant sounds, 3 or 4 is okay in 1 lesson. So after we introduce the sound, we demonstrate blending with different letter sounds. And after we demonstrate blending, we have to then get them to practice their blending, which is the first step for reading. And so pairs play a game of noughts and crosses with full words. I'll show you in a bit how this game is played. And then they do additional reading practice with the board game. The board game works like a usual board game, except there are words to read instead of whatever is in a usual board game. And then we demonstrate and practice segmenting. And I'll show you an activity as well on how to practice segmenting. And then we do a written dictation. The reason I do blending before segmenting is because I find that blending is much easier for students than segmenting. Segmenting requires more concentration because there's having to notice the initial, middle, and final sounds and all of that. And the activities for segmenting are also a little bit trickier. So if students are more confident with that they know the letter sounds, then that takes a bit of the pressure off, I think. So that's why I do blending first. So it's C, introduce a set of sounds, F, demonstrate blending, A, play noughts and crosses, E, play a board game, B, demonstrate and practice segmenting, and D, do a written dictation. The written dictation is basically the assessment stage. So with this, you can tell if they actually recognize all the sounds. Okay. So noughts and crosses, this is how it's played. So basically what you have is like an XO grid, and it's played the same way as noughts and crosses. So student 1 would read 1 word, and then if they get it right, they place an X there or an O there, whichever one they are. And then student 2 will have their go and play 1 word. And if it's correct, then an X or an O, whatever it is. I thought it would be cool to show you guys how to do it online, since a lot of us are teaching online. You can get students to use the annotate tool as they play together in pairs. And instead of noughts and crosses, what I use is star and stamp. Star and heart from stamp. So for example, student 1 reads sits, and if student 2 agrees that it is correct, then student 1 puts a star there. Student 2 will then, for example, say pins and put a heart there. And so on and so forth until there's 3 in a row, basically. And whoever gets 3 in a row the first time will win the game. So that's noughts and crosses. It's a pretty simple game. And I've played it with young learners and with adults, and everyone seems to like it. So yes, the next activity that I want to show you is for segmenting. So for segmenting, I usually have a worksheet like this, and I need students to look at me to be able to do this because they need to see my fingers. So I would, for example, number 1, hold up 3 fingers and then show them 1, 2, 3. And if you look at my screen and where my mouse is, so 1, 2, 3. And then I'd say to them a word like mop, for example, and I'd point to the letter sound I want them to recognize. So 1, 2, 3, and I say mop, which means it's the third letter. So that goes over there. Yeah. Let's do number 3 also as an example. So for a 2-letter word, I might say, so again, it's 1, 2, and I would say am, and then the students would have to put a over there. And so we do a couple of words like that with these spaces. At this point, if either of the activities are unclear or anything that I've said is unclear, please step in and ask on chat or on voice, whichever one you prefer. We're almost out of time, and before we go, I want to give you these questions which will help you think about your situation and your work environment. I've taken these from SCORE again. So basically what I want you to think about when you are planning your literacy curriculum or planning your literacy lessons are these questions. So have a quick read of these. And if you've got any other questions or comments, please put them on chat or ask me on voice. Share them on voice.
Hi, Zahra.
Yes. Hello.
Hi, thanks. Really appreciate that. It's really relevant, but unfortunately, there isn't enough time. Would you mind sharing our references and also, if you could, your email, if we can communicate through that?
Yes. I've got a similar question from Kendra. Do you have favorite literacy resources for adult learners? So I must say, for my Delta, my specialism was literacy teaching. And one of the limitations for me was that there really wasn't that much out there, especially for adults. And so through the course of the last 3 years and developing literacy materials for my center, a lot of the stuff that I have come up with are modifications of the resources that are out there for kids. I will give you all my email address. And if there's anything specific that you're looking for, you can always email me and ask me. And I'm happy to help. I should also say you'll find that a lot of the games and activities that we do for kids, adults really enjoy as well. So don't be afraid to experiment with those in your adult literacy classes.
Sorry, and one more question. What about, since we are teaching not just adult learners, but adult ESL learners, so it's not just the sound recognition, it's also understanding the word itself. Does that have any barriers to your teaching?
So at literacy level with adults and even with kids, what we try to do is focus very much on developing the skill of reading. So a lot of blending and segmenting and things like that. And what it involves is having to practice it a lot. So there's like lots of words to read. And you have students every now and then asking you, what do these words mean? But I try to get them to focus more on blending the sounds rather than thinking of the meaning. Because as I said earlier in my presentation, the foundational reading skills come first, and that's necessary for fluency. And then vocabulary knowledge and background knowledge comes into play. So at literacy level, I wouldn't focus too much on vocabulary. And if I did, I would only maybe teach them a couple of words. a couple of common words that people use with the sounds that they are learning. But I do spend some time on speaking practice. So talking about things I like, talking about my family, talking about myself. And I give them language and vocabulary that way rather than focus on it a lot during lessons. Because my main focus would be reading and writing at literacy level for adults and for kids. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, thanks a lot. It does. Thank you.
1 more minute, Zahra.
Yeah, so I'm done unless anyone has any questions. That's it. Thank you very much, guys, for attending. I'm glad that you all came and I hope you found it useful. Feel free to contact me by email whenever you need help with anything literacy related.